The core methodology that kind of plays with the values of how I teach this class 601, the entrepreneurial mindset, is really focused around how do we get the students engaged in full action. And so if I define the entrepreneurial mindset, I'll define it this way. An entrepreneurial mindset is really this interest capability of noticing problems in the world, whether it's very localized in your own work and or what you see in the marketplace, and then being interested and willing to take action to go after it. And so from that perspective, the way I see this course, 601, being the very first course in the master program, is draw them into action. And so they work hard in this class. I put them into groups. So there's this group learning that takes place in that space. And then they're responsible to present the material. So we call it Flip the Classroom. And in Flip the Classroom, the concept for them is really they have to learn more and then present to each other. And so almost every week, one of the groups is presenting, and then we have follow-up conversations. And so the group themselves, the individual group that's presenting, they're doing an awful lot of prep. They create a PowerPoint, they pull in outside material. The book that we use for that class is a pretty significant book on the entrepreneurial mindset. And so there's so much value there. And so each student is part of a group and they present quite a bit. So philosophically, my goal really is be in groups, be responsible, each person being responsible to deliver material concepts. And so you go deeper when you have to present, naturally. And then so for the perspective of my philosophy is really draw in the action right away. As much as I can, I draw them into action because entrepreneurs are all about action. For 601, the students have no way to get out of doing work. And so because I use Flip the Classroom as a primary strategy, they have to read the material, they have to prepare slides, and they have to engage their fellow students. What I ask them to do when they're presenting in the classroom is prepare questions for your colleagues, your fellow students, to draw them into the conversation and make it as interactive as we can. And so strategically, I think there's great value in a student. Recognize this is a master's program. So I'm not doing a lot of lecturing. The students themselves are truly teaching each other along the way as they prepare the material, present the material, think about kinds of questions they might ask each other to cause others to ask or others to engage. And then after each presentation, we have a Q&A time and we have a recommendations time. And so it's not really a feedback as much as what we call a feed forward. And feed forward is, hey, what would we like to see more of next time? And where did you really hit the mark? And so the students who weren't presenting, they're fully engaged because I'm requiring them to be prepared to ask questions, prepared to give feedback, feed forward, and to engage the material. And so each class session truly is a bit of that or a good bit of that happening. Yeah, we do want to, particularly in a master's program, connect the students to the real world. And so how we do that in 601 is we ask them to think up and then design an action learning project. And so they're very early in the semester. In fact, the second class. First class, we go through the normal first class kind of stuff, and then I tell them what the action learning project looks like, what they're going to have to do throughout the semester. And then the second class, so week into it, they have to show up with an idea of a business they would like to start and or how they would do entrepreneurship inside of the organization where they already work, because we can do it inside an organization and or a nonprofit that they would be interested in starting. So the entrepreneurial spirit inside a nonprofit or launching a nonprofit. And so their connection to real world thinking is they are required to do, and throughout the semester, ultimately, the research into what would that market look like, what would that business look like, what would that nonprofit look like, what would be the cost structure, who would be the primary audience, all of the core business things. And so they will do that throughout this semester. And so not only are we in the classroom going through what is an entrepreneurial mindset, what is an entrepreneur, but we're actually looking at the individual components of being an entrepreneur through doing an action learning project. Yeah, the different learning styles of students is something that's valuable for us as the faculty to pay attention to, obviously. And so in this class, fortunately and unfortunately, they have to do a little bit of everything. And so there is some instruction time happening in the classroom, but a heavy dose of it is their own reading time, reading the material, reading outside of the regular textbook, drawing from whatever marketplace they can get to draw material. And then they work in collaboration with other students in group setting. And so we have some learning style, meaning listening, and happening in the classroom where they're listening to me and or listening to each other when they're presenting. And then there's reading, of course, is a heavy dose of what they need to do. And then being in groups, they learn from each other in a collaborative setting. So they do a lot of group work in this program. And then one of the fun exercises that I started a few years back for this course, Understanding Entrepreneurship, is I asked them to watch in the neighborhood of 6 Shark Tank episodes so they can see how entrepreneurs go look for money, so to speak, with the sharks in that. And what I'm asking them to do is look at how did the entrepreneurs prepare for the Shark Tank? What kind of research did they have to do? What kinds of things did they have to declare when they were looking in the Shark Tank, looking to receive money? And so that interaction, and then they write a real quick write-up on that. So they have to do that 4 times in the semester, where they watch a couple of episodes and then respond to that with a quick 1-page paper. Yeah, in 601, and particularly in 601, I do encourage very much a reflective process of learning, meaning what did we do today in class? What does that mean to me? And connecting that to their action learning projects. So on a regular basis, they are hearing something in the classroom from me and or their other students, and then I'm asking, how do you apply that to your work in your action learning project? And so we're having that's a rinse and repeat, kind of a situation throughout the entire semester. And so I believe that students get that sense from the natural flow of the course. The second thing I might say is that I have a penchant, because I spent 16 years in manufacturing, toward continuous improvement. In my world, we call it Kaizen. Kaizen is the Japanese word for continuous improvement. And the look at continuous improvement is always a reflective action. What is happening, and how could it be better, and how might I participate in that, making it better? And the successful entrepreneurs tend to do that very naturally. And so in this course, I try to encourage that as a learning process, as something that they pick up and do in the class, because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be ready to do continuous improvement. You've got to be reflectively thinking about, how did we do today? How can we do it better tomorrow? And do that every day.